Of all the Metroid Prime games to date, none have been met with quite as much animosity as Federation Force. Following the game's reveal at E3 2015, fans of the series showed up en masse on discussion forums and comment sections to express their overall resentment towards the new game's direction, even going as far as creating an online petition calling for the game's production to be cancelled entirely. Fast forward to a little over a year later, and the game is finally in our hands. Does Metroid Prime Federation Force have what it takes to don the Metroid name, or does it get lost in space? Federation Force's campaign is made up of 22 missions, each with their own unique objectives and environments that all feel different from one another, meaning that there's rarely ever a feeling of repetition. Each mission is also very short, ranging anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. It's very clear that Federation Force was designed with the incentive to play on the go. This choice in level design, however, ends up hurting what are arguably two of the most important components to any Metroid Prime game, that being atmosphere and exploration. Because the game insists on rewarding the player for beating each mission under a certain amount of time, I didn't feel as compelled to explore the world around me, and while each mission's environments were certainly evocative of classic Metroid, I didn't take as much time to appreciate them fully because it felt like I was being hurried to complete the objective in par time rather than go at my own pace. When it comes to controls, your mileage may vary depending on which 3DS system you own. The game controls just fine if you're playing on a new 3DS system, allowing for players to use the C-stick to aim and look around, similar to your average twin-stick shooter. However, if you don't happen to own the newer 3DS model, the game resorts to gyroscope controls for precise aiming. Each method presents its own pros and cons, so it essentially just boils down to player preference. It is worth mentioning, though, that the game can become quite challenging as you progress through the story, making the way the game controls matter that much more. Thankfully, the controls end up working very well for the most part, only ever becoming an issue during some of the more hectic battle sequences. Apart from the game's main campaign, Federation Force also features a soccer-like multiplayer mode called Blast Ball. There really isn't too much to say about this mode. Blast Ball pits two teams of 3 in a small arena, with the main objective being to shoot the large ball into your opponent's goal. It's fun in short bursts, with some matches being more stagnant than others. The main problem with Blast Ball, and what ultimately keeps it from becoming something worth pouring hours into, is the lack of strategic gameplay. During most of the match, at least 4 or more players are shooting the ball at once from all angles, which oftentimes leads to the ball traveling in random directions until someone happens to score. This type of gameplay could evolve over time as players get better at the mode, but in its current state it just feels entirely luck-based. Take into account that the game only has one map to play on, and Blast Ball ends up being an experience that's fun, but only for a short amount of time. Metroid Prime Federation Force is not your typical Metroid title. While the game certainly feels like it belongs in the Metroid universe, it still plays like a spin-off, being more closely tied to 2006's Metroid Prime Hunters than any other game in the franchise. With the game's campaign clocking in at 15 to 20 hours, there's a lot to play through here. Add in the fantastic amount of mission variety, as well as the ability to play with up to 4 players locally or online, and you're left with a surprisingly lengthy and enjoyable story mode experience for a handheld Metroid title. And while Blast Ball may wind up being something of an acquired taste, it's still fun in moderation. Despite some of its shortcomings, Federation Force still ended up being an overall enjoyable experience for me. Those in search of the next flagship title in the Metroid series may end up disappointed with this latest entry. However, for everyone else, Metroid Prime Federation Force ends up being a game that shoots and scores.
The doom and gloom atmosphere of Hyrule bathed in twilight, the dark, grotesque look of the Twilight creatures Link faces along the way, as well as the challenging 21 Pokemon species released so far that only 46 are seen here, with 16 playable fighters and 30 support Pokemon. That's not to say that what we do have isn't great in its own right,